I'm happy you were able to join us today at noon. This is our mental health awareness lunch and learn. And as you just heard, it is being recorded. So if you aren't able to attend the whole session, but you want to hear everything, you're welcome to listen to the recording later. It will be on our YouTube channel by the hopefully the end of the week, or you can go to our OFA webpage, and if you go to resources and there's a drop down menu, it has webinars. Just click on that and we'll have all the webinars, including this one, included. So I am Joanne Hughes, and I'm the Capacity Development Coordinator for OFA, and I organize and schedule these lunch and learns on a regular basis, along with another OFA staff person who is involved in the topic of the day, and this one is Joanne Fuller, and she is the Projects and Training Coordinator for OFA, and she does a lot with mental health. So today we are going to hear from Gerry Friesen, co-founder and chief administrative officer of Manitoba Farmer Wellness and author of the book, The Recovering Farmer. Gerry's passion is in helping others find solutions for various issues that life throws at us. He'll share his own journey with anxiety and depression to a place of improved mental health. It's a reminder to us that it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to reach out. This is an interactive discussion, so we'd like you to put your hand up during the session or write in the chat, and Joanne and I will be monitoring it. Attendees here will be entered into a draw of one of 4 of Gerry's books, The Recovering Farmer. But before we get into that, and before Joanne Fuller introduces herself, she has a video that she'd like to share that Gerry had given us.
Hi, my name is Gerry Friesen, and I am the author of The Recovering Farmer. I wrote the book because there are a lot of people that are on a journey with anxiety, with depression, with addictions, and there is still a significant stigma involved with that. There's 3 key points I want them to understand. Number 1 is you are not alone. Number 2 is it's more than okay to reach out for help. And the third one is there's hope and there's relief. It's dangerous when we just kind of wrap ourselves in our own cocoon because these dark thoughts start taking over. And it's very, very easy to, at that point, just simply have the attitude that life isn't worth living. People would be better off if I wasn't here. And it's scary. If we're not proactive about it, we can just sink deeper into that abyss. Only when we start talking about it can we actually start moving forward and become mentally well. I'm hoping that if there's folks out there that are struggling, or we all know someone that's struggling, that they will tune in. Have a listen to the conversation, because it is in that conversation that we're going to find that hope, we're going to find that relief, and we're going to find those tools, whether that is to help ourselves or to help someone else that we care about.
Okay. Thanks, Gerry, for that little video. It's a great introduction. I think it's a very impactful video as well. So it tells that story. So I just want to say, Gerry, I'm so happy to have you here today. I've listened to your discussions at other areas across Canada, and we're really blessed that you are here to share your story and answer questions, and in hopes that we can help other people. And it can be challenging times out there, and you truly are an inspiration. So I just want to welcome you. And whether you're you're seeking help yourself, or if you know of somebody that is struggling, please share this video with them. This whole session will be recorded and will be available on our YouTube. So I can't stress enough that if you want to share it, please do. So I just wanted to remind, I know Joanne mentioned it, but please, if when we get into our questions, if you have any additional questions, or if you want to put up your hand and ask them or pop them in the chat, we are more than happy to mention it. And the one other thing I just want to say that if at any point any of this is triggering, please know Ontario farmers have the Farmer Wellness Initiative to call to access free of charge counseling. The phone number is 1-866-267-6255. And if you do need to pop off, just send Joanne or I a private message to make sure that you are okay today. Okay, Gerry, we're going to get into some questions. So to get things going, just wanted to have you formally introduce yourself and maybe include what you do. You are the co-founder and CAO of the Manitoba Farmer Wellness. So if you can maybe just elaborate on all of that.
All right, thanks, Joanne, and thanks to both you, Joannes. It's going to be interesting. I almost feel ganged up on my screen. You're on either side of me, but the easy part is I don't have to try and remember who's who because you're both Joanne, of course. So I really appreciate you the invitation to join you folks today. Joanne, if you've heard me in other webinars or podcasts, whatever you want to call them, you know that I am incredibly passionate about talking about it. And so I appreciate these conversations. I'm not sure where to start with introducing myself. I used to farm, I grew up on a farm, used to farm in southwestern Manitoba. During that time, of course, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and we're going to get into that. But what happened is, as the farm was winding down in 2007, I became involved with the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line, which it was called at the time, and really started learning more about mental illness, started really understanding better what I was dealing with, what I was living with. And as the years progressed, always trying to learn more, because I know in my own case, at least, the more I'm aware, the more I know, the easier it is for me to deal with, as I say in my book, you know what, it's a journey I'm on for the rest of my life. And so I need to be very proactive in that. But also during that time, and I know we're going to probably get into this, I started talking publicly about my journey, and really have become passionate over the years in mental well-being, particularly in agriculture. And through that, I know when I was with the farm line 15 years ago now, we sometimes talked about, because farmers were asking for further resources instead of just the crisis line, they wanted something more where they could get further help with what they were dealing with, whether it was stress, depression, anxiety, whatever that might be. But there didn't seem to be the will or resources to do that. And now, going back 4 years ago, I think it is, one of the people I was working with at the farm line called me and asked whether I would set up a program in Manitoba, a Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program. And I said then only if she would help me, and she did. And so we started working on it. We were very happy with Ontario's own Deb Van Berkel, who was huge in helping us setting up our program. And again, perhaps this is why I struggled when I was farming. I always take a simplistic view of things. I thought, okay, we're gonna fire this thing up. We're gonna get a couple of counselors. I knew which counselors perhaps could work with us. We'd get some organizations to donate some money, and the rest would be simple. As it turned out, this grew much bigger and much faster than any of us had really expected, and we found out very quickly we needed someone to do the administrative work. And because of my job, I do mediation work. I call that my day job.
I had the time, I had the knowledge of the program that I could do that. And so that's why I sit here today as a chief administrative officer, but also as a recovering farmer. It's two different hats I wear, although they're inextricably, ooh, that's a big word, linked. They're also very separate pieces in my life, but something I really enjoy doing.
That's great. No, that's great. That's where the two worlds collide, right? So now can you walk us through your mental health journey? I know you've had some struggles, so and you're ready to talk about it. So that would be great if you could walk us through your mental health
Sure.
journey.
Well, I was officially diagnosed in 2004. What was happening, I was heavily involved in farm debt mediation. I was sitting around a kitchen table with a farm couple with a gentleman that I was working together with, and suddenly I felt my heart do some really interesting palpitations. I felt lightheaded. I grabbed the edge of the table. I was convinced I was going to pass out. I was probably having a heart attack, but it passed relatively quickly. But then it started happening more often, and to where I finally went to see a doctor. And again, just not really knowing the implications of what was happening, he just said, you know what, you're having anxiety attacks, and if it hasn't happened already, it could lead to depression. So he threw a prescription at me, and I just thought, well, that'd be the end of that. What I've come to learn, of course, is that my mental health issues started much earlier. In fact, as a child, as a teenager, and so these were certain issues that I was dealing with. I go into more depth in that in my book. For example, the fact that I grew up in a fundamental Mennonite home. I often thought I was feeling guilt. I always say Mennonites are infamous for guilt, but I found out others are as well. So I can't lay claim to that. But as it turns out, I know it was anxiety. Um, in the 90s, as I was dealing with certain issues off the farm and on the farm, I used a lot of alcohol to cope. That's where the addiction piece comes in. And so when I started learning more about it, certainly I realized that this had started at an early age. I had used unhealthy coping methods, which just led to bigger problems. And that's why when I started learning more about mental illness with the farm line, again, I started understanding things better. I've I've seen a host, probably, I don't know how many professionals over the years, never seemed to find one that could connect the dots for me, never seemed to be the type of help that could help me. I know we've talked about the importance of having counselors with an agricultural background. Certainly, I ran into those frustrations as well with the professionals I was seeking help from. But it was in 7 years ago, 2018, when I was going off the rails again, and my family said to me, "Dad, you got to go get help." And at that time, I was frustrated because, like I said, I had seen so many different types of professionals and nothing seemed to help. But to placate them, I said, "Okay, I would, but tell me where to go." And my wife suggested a naturopath. And so I phoned and made the appointment, not being very enthused about it. Clearly, because I thought going to a naturopath meant that I would have to change my diet, and I wasn't really into that. I'm kind of a meat and potatoes type guy, and I wanted to stick with that. But needless to say, I did go. It was a naturopath with a specialty in mental health. That first appointment was for an hour and a half, and for the first time ever, someone connected dots for me. Didn't fix me that day, but connected dots. And my wife still sometimes talks about the fact when I came home from that appointment, she just looked at me and says, "That's the first time you've ever come home from an appointment with a smile on your face." And so that kind of says it all. Finally, I think I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. Um, but again, like I said before, this is a journey that I'm on for the rest of my life. I know that I've got tools, I've got things that I need to do and be on top of things, be proactive in making sure that I deal with this. I could go into a lot more detail about, I know there's going to be people that are going to say, well, aren't you on medication? And well, no, I'm not, because there's another, I'm a unique person. Apparently, I'm part of 8% of the population for who antidepressants don't work. And so I have to deal with this in different ways. And I'm okay with that. As long as I'm proactive. And so for me, it's a daily journey. I get up in the mornings now, and some mornings are great and others aren't that great, but I also know that it's going to be something that normally lasts for an hour or two, and then I'll be okay. And other times it might last for a day, but I know it isn't forever. I know it's a journey, and
Right.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that journey. And it's an everyday, just trying to get yourself centered. And maybe you can tell us why you decided to share your story and why you continue to do so.
Well, Joanne, the simple answer is I was manipulated into it. Uh, I'm the type of person that has a difficult time saying no to anything. And so back in 2010, I had done some volunteer work for the Farm Line. They had received some funding and were going to run a series of workshops on specifically men and depression. The manager at the Farm Line at the time told me that, well, she had finally manipulated me into co-facilitating these. I didn't really want to do that, but I did. Uh, and then she told me that she would like, as part of the workshops, to have a male talk about their own struggles with mental health. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Um, but we couldn't come up with anybody. And she was somewhat familiar with my journey at that time. So she asked me whether I would tell my story. Like I say, I said yes. Um, Not realizing again the implications of it. So I did. I started talking publicly about my journey in 2010. In fact, it was kind of funny. The kickoff to these workshops was a call-in radio show. We walked into the studio and we were a few minutes in, and the host looked at me and says, "I understand you have a story to tell." And that's when it hit me. And back then it was an oh crap moment. These days I call it a WTF moment, where I knew I could either start talking or not talk and look totally idiotic. And so I started talking, and it's just amazing how these conversations, one-on-one conversations with a group like this, I know they help me. I know when I can talk with other folks who are also on journeys, we're all on journeys.
Mhm.
When we can talk one-on-one, we share ideas, we share concerns, we share what we're going through. And I know I've learned a lot. And so that's why I keep talking about it.
Mhm. That's great. Definitely sharing with fellow peers or family or friends um, helps. It
So,
does.
It
That's why
does.
those coffee shop meetings are the best.
so
Joe?
Yes.
sharing your story like this is one thing, but you decided to write a book. Um, when did you get the decision? When did you decide that it was time to write a book about your journey?
Short answer to that, Joanne, is I have absolutely no idea. That's that. Again, going back to 2010, that same person that manipulated, you folks are all going to think I'm an easy pushover, and to a certain degree, I guess I am. That same person who got me to tell my story also told me then I should start writing a blog. And so I did. And my train of thought, if it in fact doesn't leave the station without me, is good for about 600 words, and then I'm done. And so I was doing these weekly blogs. For me, it was a type of journaling, actually. We often talk about how important journaling is, particularly when you're on the type of journey I'm on. And so at some points during that, I was thinking, well, maybe I could compile these into a book. And yet when I would go back and read some of them, I had gone down rabbit holes which I wasn't sure would do anybody any good. Or I would be telling stories about some of the escapades, I call them, on the farm. And I know someone said one day, he said, well, you should write a book and talk about all of these. And well, you can't have a mental health book and a storybook and a memoir, or at least that's what I thought, till someone actually said, "Hey, you can have all three." And so I think, in fact, my grandson was here the other day and he said, "Grandpa, when did you start writing your book?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure." And so we went back to what I call my garbage folder on my computer where I would have written stuff and then threw it aside. And it looks like I started writing probably 6 years ago. And and then I had written a whole bunch of stuff and I actually put it aside, Joanne. And then shortly after the Farmer Wellness Program started, I did an interview with one of our papers in Manitoba. And obviously, I must have talked a little bit about my own journey and perhaps how that linked me with the Farmer Wellness Program. And the day after, she sent me a text and said, "Wow, you should write a book."
Mhm.
And so I had a conversation or two with her, and that actually got me going again. And I guess, like they say, the rest is history. Here we are.
So how was that journey of writing the book? And like it's such a personal memoir.
It was interesting. There are bits and pieces in that book when I would reflect on them, particularly that chapter I have on my alcohol dependency. When I would reflect on that, I would have to put it aside because it was pushing me towards the abyss. It was giving me memories that weren't really very good for me, weren't good for me. They were just making me think again how badly I had messed up because I now have a deeper understanding of how that impacted the people around me. But for the most part, writing it was in fact quite therapeutic. Um, and part of that is that people with depression and anxiety often will look in the rearview mirror at their life and think it was a waste. There was nothing to their life. And I often fell into that too. And yet, when I started writing the book and would look back at many of the different experiences on the farm with my wife, with my kids, with the agricultural politics, I call it, I was involved in the 90s, with the farm debt work I do, with the relationships I built at the farm line, I started realizing that I had had lots of good experiences in life. There's lots of stuff I could be thankful for. And so at the end of the day, I found it was actually quite therapeutic.
So what can readers expect to find in the book when they read it?
Well, that's an interesting question. And as much as I read through it, I don't know how often back when I was writing it, I picked it up about a month ago and just skimmed through it again, and I wasn't sure what readers would pick up out of it, but maybe that's because I'd read it too often. But I I like to use humor in when I address my journey, when I address life. So I've got some funny stories in there. I've got some stories about incidents on the farm where I know we may be talking about the link between mental health and farm safety, and certainly where I did stuff where I can just thank the good Lord I'm alive today because I did some really dumb things when I was under a lot of stress or needed to get stuff done. And so there's stories like that. Some of them are kind of humorous. Um, but at the end of the day, I hope, and Joanne, you made this comment before, and lots of people have, when they responded to me, have said it's relatable, um, from
Mhm.
young to old, from farmers to non-farmers, or they can take bits and pieces out of that book and they can go, yeah, you know what, I can relate to that. And when we find that we often think, we're alone, that nobody outside of this little tiny circle I'm in will understand, and yet when they find out that someone's been through a journey themselves and when they see something that they have written and they can relate to that, that helps them as well.
So is that like the hope for your book? When someone finishes the last page, is that how you want them to feel? Is there anything more to that?
No, I want them to enjoy the read. I want them to have a laugh or two throughout. Some of the readers may shed a tear or two because there are some dark stuff. I mean, again, the addictions chapter isn't a pleasant chapter really to dwell on. I write a chapter on suicide and some thoughts around that and some of my experiences with people I know, some of the impact it's had on me. So there's some sadness in the book. But at the end of the day, again, if people can close the book, have a little smile on their face and say, yeah, you know what, that was worth the read. I'm glad I read that book. That'd be great.
So how can the individuals that are here today connect with you to purchase a book?
Very simple. They can go to my website, gerryfriesen.ca. There's numerous different links on there, Amazon, Friesen Press, Kindle, and I don't even know all of them, where they can buy a book or they can reach out directly to me. I know that my price that I have a price for my book and I can mail it anywhere in Canada. Total price I believe I have in there $28. I know that's competitive. If you get it from me, of course, you get a signed copy. So there's that option too. So there's a host of different options that people can utilize to buy the book.
And I think maybe this is a good time, Joe. You had suggested
Okay.
maybe this is a good place to say who is winning these books, because there's 4 individuals that will get given a book today. Go ahead,
And
Joe.
it's a signed copy and has a really nice bookmark in it too. So it's a great book. Like I really enjoyed the takeaways. So every chapter kind of describes it, and then there's some takeaways. So it's a real, it's a helpful and it's an easy read. It's relatable. It's just, I thought it was excellent. So for Gerry not being a writer or an author, I thought you did a very good job, Gerry.
Thank you.
So the winners of the 4 books and the people that are on today is Wayne Gaiman, Olivia Wallace, Jamie Beaumont, and Margaret DeBoer. So those are the 4 we did from our list. We did a random picker, and that's the 4 that were picked out of who's on. So we were kind of behind the scenes doing some work.
And maybe this is a good opportunity to get into a question in the chat before we move on to the next questions that we have. Do you have a daily routine or practices that you use to center yourself to get past the initial fog we may find ourselves in? If yes, what are they? And that came from Amy.
That's a really good question. And I've tried various things over the years. For me, of course, it makes a big difference whether it's winter or summer. I was telling Joanne and Joanne before that I had golfed early this morning in the summertime. I do that most every day. I'm out there when the sun comes up. And I'll tell you, there's nothing that gets me in a better place than being outside, sun shining, a couple of buddies, having a few laughs, hitting the golf ball. Yeah, you swear occasionally, but at the end of the day, you feel better after the round. It's in the wintertime that I have to be particularly aware. And so there's different tricks I use. Number one is a sad lamp, or as some people call it, a happy lamp. It's for seasonal affective disorder, but I've found that that certainly is very helpful. I have to be very diligent with using a treadmill to get some exercise during the winter for a few different reasons, but certainly my mental health is part of that. Um, I have to make sure that I listen to music more than I do. I know I used to drive a lot, not quite as much anymore, but certainly I would often find myself driving down the highway and all of a sudden realize, you know what, I'm just zoned out and thinking about stuff that isn't healthy at all. And so I'll switch on the radio and listen to music, and that helps. Um, human connection. And again, I think we're all getting tired of hearing the word COVID, but I think taught us a very valuable lesson, certainly did for me, is that when there's a lack of human connection is not healthy. And so if I can connect with people, that's helpful. And always to keep in mind, oh, sorry, there's one other one that I should mention, and that's for years we've heard about gratitude, and that we need to be grateful, and we should make an effort to list the things we are grateful for. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit cynical about that for quite a while. And then actually this last winter, I really started doing that when I would wake up in the mornings and have a lot of anxiety. I would just lay in bed and I would start listing the things that I was very grateful for. And I'll tell you, it's very, very helpful. And
Mhm.
so these are all things I do. And as my naturopath told me on my last visit with her a couple of months ago, is I think for years I've been hoping for that magic wand that one day just poof and everything would be better and I'd be happy and there'd be no more problems. And she kind of gave me the heads up, which I knew, that there was no such thing for me, but the fact that it's a culmination of all these little things that I can do, it's a culmination of those that are really going to be helpful for my journey. And so I still learn tricks on almost on a daily basis. I enjoy going through Instagram reels, for example, half an hour before I go to bed and lay there and just scroll through them. And some of them are funny and I can actually laugh, but there's very often there's tricks that you can use for if you're on one of these mental health journeys, and some of them work and some of them don't, but it's a matter of us being able to take the things that work for us and then make sure that we do those.
Right. Yeah, that's very important. And I know about gratitude. I just had a struggle the last year with some family health, and you really have to think about what you're grateful for to get through things. So that's very good advice. And of course, music. And sometimes you just need to dance in your kitchen, right? Put the music on and just give it. And
Well,
yeah.
Joanne, sorry, I'm a Mennonite. I'm not supposed to dance.
Oh. Uh, so, okay, so here's one of the questions I thought, when you were at your lowest, did your life have any movements of enjoyment or fun?
You know, Joanne, I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I've thought long and hard about it. And I'll say again, I think taking the time to reflect back on my life by writing this book showed me that there were times when, yes, I think I was happy. I was enjoying things, absolutely. Did I have real joy? No, I don't think I did.
Right.
And it was even in moments where I was having fun, and perhaps it was a golf game with buddies when they came out to visit us. You know, there were times where, yes, I could feel some happiness. There was always that cloud hanging over me.
Hmm.
And so that was something that I needed to deal with. And it, it, it's it's sometimes difficult to really go, well, okay, are you happy? Well, I don't know. Am I?
Yeah.
I'm feeling good, but am I happy? Do I feel joy? And I know I taught, well, this person from the farm line that we started our program together with her, we've been really good friends over the years and have helped each other. And I know a few months ago I was talking to her and I said, you know, I have this strange feeling inside of me and I'm wondering if it's joy. And she just said, oh my God, are you flirting with joy? Well, you know, it becomes, and again, I have to take a step back because I told my wife this the other day. Sorry, I'm rambling here.
That's okay.
I told my wife the other day, I said, you know what, I think I've become so consumed with connecting dots and being aware that sometimes life is really good, but I don't recognize that. And it goes back to that being grateful piece. When I
Yeah.
wake up in the morning and I have anxiety for absolutely no reason in the world, I just have anxiety. And when I lay there and go, well, why are you feeling anxious? I go, I don't know. And then when I start listing these gratitude or things I'm grateful for, that anxiety dissipates. And I
Hmm.
realize that my life is good.
Hmm.
There's no reason for this negativity or this dark cloud over me. And so that's helpful.
Right. A friend of mine, uh, she talks about it in a way of shabby joy. not every day is joyful, and it's not outright beautiful joy. She calls it shabby joy, and it could be little bits and pieces, but somewhere in your day you need to find a little bit of joy, even if it's shabby joy.
Yeah,
So
and that,
that is, along the same lines, right?
yeah, that's a really good point.
So, like right now, our farmers are dealing with the uncertainty, and we're dealing with that across Canada. But with Ontario, we have tariffs and trade and weather and succession planning and all those big heavy things that farmers are dealing with, and they just build up, and all that extra burden can affect that resilience of a farmer. So any thoughts on how farmers and producers can help these somewhat negative stressors?
It's incredibly difficult, Joanne. Um, and you're right. And the things that you listed are unknowns, right? They're uncertainties. And those can be the most stressful. And I read a headline this morning about how farmers are watching the tariffs kind of like they're watching the weather forecast, right? Okay, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen next week? What's going to happen next month? And that uncertainty, and I said this a while ago, and some people on here might kick me for saying this, but I said at one point, okay, Trump, either put the tariffs on or quit talking about it because it's these unknowns that are driving us crazy. And I'll give you an example. A number of years ago, I was dealing with a farmer and farm debt, and we were sitting around his kitchen table compiling his financial statements, and he had had some custom work done. And we asked him, I said, so how much did that cost you? And he said, you know what? I got that invoice 2 weeks ago. I haven't opened the envelope because I'm scared of what's going to be in there. And
Mhm.
I said to him, I said, grab the envelope, open that invoice, and you're going to start feeling better about it. And he said, well, no, how, why, how? And I said, just do it. Trust me. And so he did. And although it was a little bit higher than he had hoped for, his face kind of changed and he said, how did you know? And I said, because you switch from worrying about it to now actively thinking about how you can actually deal with it. And so these are some of the things when these uncertainties hit. I sometimes say when I do my presentations, I tell people, well, there's a whole list of things here you can't control. And so and so your list of worries, your list of stressors include those things you can't control, but also things you can control. So take the ones you can't control and put them aside as best you can because that makes the list shorter. Now, I know that's much easier said than done, but it's also again a matter of being aware and dealing with them. And again, sorry, can I expound even further on this?
Yes.
I sometimes use the example that we have two brains. We have a thinking brain and a feeling brain. And the thinking brain is accurate, methodical. It will think things through and come up with logical answers, whereas the feeling brain reacts quickly. It's somewhat of a drama queen, and that feeling brain will always act first when we're under a lot of stress, and so we're going to react in ways that aren't good for your business at all. And I know Farm Management Canada did a study a number of years ago now about how stress affects farm business management, and it was very clear from their study that those people that are able to manage their stress are likely to have a more profitable business. And so as much as these uncertainties are there, we have to do our best to manage them to make sure that our businesses can move ahead as best possible.
Yeah, no, that's great advice for sure. And I know we've had an analogy here with one of our speakers, and they talked about picking rocks in a field. And if you put them in the wagon and you don't know how many rocks to put in that wagon, you're going to break the wagon. So if you take your stressors as an analogy to those rocks, you need to be able to take some of those stressors out so it doesn't overflow and break.
Yeah,
So That's really good advice. Now, with your stress, anxiety, and addictions, and I know in the book there's a section on that, but how did that impact your family?
You know what? Well, there's a couple of pieces to that. Number one is when we were going through some significant financial challenges on the farm. And just to give a little bit of background to that, I farmed together with a brother, and we had a turkey operation and a hog operation. And at some point in time in the late 80s, early 90s, supply management was always under scrutiny with any trade talks there were. And so we were getting a little concerned about it. In the meantime, there was a lot of hype about the hog industry. So we made that decision to expand in the hog industry. And we did that in 1998. And we did the expansion in the spring of 98. And by Christmas time, when we started marketing hogs out of that expansion, the price had dropped to 19 cents a pound, which was the lowest price in 50 years. So we had spent something like $150 in raising a hog, and we're getting $35 in the marketplace. So the losses were substantial. Um, where am I going with this? How did it
The
impact my
family.
family? Sorry, right. And so, like I said before, I was already dealing with mental health stuff at the time. These financial issues just made things a lot worse. I would often go to the hog barn. Hog barn was a refuge for me. In fact, it was away from my family. It was away from the world. It was away from the telephone. Sometimes I think I was trying to run away from myself too. But so I thought I was hiding it from my kids. I mean, my wife was well aware, but my kids, I thought I was hiding it from them. And I found out later that no, they would stand at the top of the stairs and they could hear my wife and I talking about some of these struggles, and they would go to bed crying. And there was all kinds of negative implications. Obviously, the drinking um, played a huge role in relationships. And I know that alcohol does a great job of reducing anxiety, but unfortunately, half an hour after you've had that drink, as alcohol leaves the body, your anxiety increases exponentially. And so the only way to combat that is to drink more, which I did, which just led to bigger problems. I talk in the book about, and my wife and I can laugh about it now, but when I started telling my story, I thought, well, I need to talk to my wife to see what kind of impact my journey had had on her. And so she told me that she felt that she had been married to four different men. And in my all my wisdom, I said to her she was lucky because I had been married to the same woman. But so obviously that didn't go over well. But really what she meant is the first 2 years that we were married, we lived in married bliss, I suppose. And then I went farming, and then the farm became more important. And then I had my addictions and my mental health issues. And so there were these two men that she wished she had never married. And so that's just the long and short of what kind of impact my journey has had on them. But the beauty of all of this, and Joanne, you've read the book, and in the last chapter, again, sorry, I'm going on here, but in the last chapter, I start each chapter with a little bit of an anecdotal story. And in the last chapter is where we went camp. We used to camp a lot with our kids, and then when they grew out of camping, we quit camping, and I had told my wife never again. And 3 years ago, I felt guilty, so borrowed a camper and went camping with our kids, and suddenly realized this was awesome for my mental health. And so now we're camping more often. But um, it's last summer, or was it the summer before? It doesn't matter. We were camping with our kids and grandkids, and one evening we're sitting by the fire and and chatting. The grandkids were playing, and suddenly this feeling came over me, and I just blurted this out. I said, "Wow, I can't believe how happy I feel." Sorry, it makes me a little emotional actually, but
Yeah.
my kids looked at me and weren't sure they had heard right, because so much of the journey had not been in that place, right?
Right.
And so that's an indication of, yes, my journey continues today. Yes, there were significant impacts on my relationships, but thank the good Lord again that I'm sitting here today. My family is intact and they're incredible supporters and they walk with me.
Right. That's great. Great, great. So one of the things I just have one more question for myself, and then Wayne has a question in the chat. But the question that I had, you had mentioned one other time where you were wearing your Thank a Farmer t-shirt, and I want you to tell that story because I think it will resonate with our farmers.
Yeah, it was, and this was quite a few years after I had done farming. Farmline used to give out these T-shirts that had "Thank a Farmer" on it, and we were down in the Dominican actually at a resort. And one morning I got up and I wore this T-shirt and I walked out to the beach, and this gentleman stopped me and he was quite irate and he says, "I have no idea why we should thank a farmer. Why don't we have to thank everybody? Why do farmers think they're special?" And he gave me his story, and he was someone from Vancouver, a businessman there. I can't even remember what business he was in, and he says, "I have my struggles too." And I didn't go there that day, Joanne. I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the enthusiasm to get engaged in that argument with him and explain to him that, hey, listen, man, if I'm a hog farmer, and I had this argument with a cousin of mine one time who's a plumber. And he said, "Well, I don't know why you farmers, this, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "I sometimes can't sell my stuff either." And I said, "Yeah, I get it. Absolutely get it. But understand this, if you have a warehouse full of toilets that one day you can't sell, you can leave them there. Yes, there's an investment there, but it's secure." I said, "When my barn full of pigs is ready to be marketed, they have to go to market. I have no choice." And so there's that distinction that I think we sometimes miss. And the other part to that, and I use this quote in the book, and I say that sometimes in the mornings when I would go to my barn, I would go, you know what? I'm raising enough meat here to feed a small city, which is a little bit of an exaggeration. But for the point is, I'm raising enough meat to feed a city, but I'm having a difficult time feeding my family. And and so that's, I think, something that as agricultural producers is something that we think about these things, and this is the reality of life. And that in itself, just saying this again, kind of almost makes my anxiety rear up because
Mhm.
because it is anxiety inducing.
Right. Yeah, that is that is good. And that story resonated with me because that's why the ag informed therapy is also very good. So then they know what challenges farmers actually are dealing with.
Yeah,
So a question in the
Sorry,
chat.
Joanne,
Yep.
can I just
Yep.
tell a short little story? And that
Sure.
ag informed is so incredibly important. In our program in Manitoba, and I know yours in Ontario and across Canada, they're building on these
Mhm.
programs like that. But just one example is when we were having some incredibly difficult financial challenges, is when I went to see a psychologist. I had been on medication, went off medication, and then something happened and I was going towards the abyss, and my wife and I decided I should try talk therapy. And so um, made an appointment with a psychologist, went to see him, talked about the fact that they're having financial issues. We had decided we wanted to sell the farm, and he just was consumed with the fact that he asked, "How can you justify selling a family farm?" Which I found rather interesting because I thought it was none of his business. In fact, he could have. And then when I got up to leave, he says, "You know what? You better go on medication because you can't afford me." And so I think that was his. And so to have someone that doesn't understand the uniqueness of agriculture, doesn't understand the fact that there are times when you're going to have financial challenges because of tariffs, because
Mhm.
of market conditions, because of weather, whatever the case may be, there's going to be financial failures. And if professional you're talking to can't understand that, we have a problem.
Yeah, no, that's right. So Jerry has a question, or sorry, Wayne has a question for you, Jerry. Have you had experience with cognitive brain therapy?
CBT,
And
yes.
does it work?
I'm not going to say no, it doesn't. Um, I'm going to say that I've tried numerous things over the years, and I remember again, this goes back to, well, it's in the probably 10 years ago, where I went to see a therapist again, and she said, well, we're going to do the CBT. And I said, you know what, I did that. It didn't really work for me. And she said, well, we're going to do a mindfulness thing. And I said, I've tried that, doesn't really work for me. And so I know some of this is because I'm not a very patient person. And so I don't necessarily always try these things as long as I should. But I would check again. I think the only point I can make is whether you're seeing a professional and it doesn't work out with the first one, don't give up. Go get a second, third, or fourth opinion. If you're trying something for your, whether it's mental health issues, stress, whatever the case may be, if one thing doesn't work, don't give up, try another one, because different things work for different folks. And so it's a matter of trying anything and everything.
Yeah. No, that's great, Jerry. So Joanne's going to lead us with some resources that are in Ontario.
Sorry, Joanne, sorry. Can I tell one more story?
You sure can.
Okay. And that is, I talked about, and you mentioned this before, right at the outset, is I'm a staunch proponent of talking about it. I know there is some folks that don't deal with the challenges that I deal with. I've done presentations where people come up to me after and say, well, thank goodness I don't deal with that. And that's super. I am very, very happy for these people. But what I tell these people all the time is you may not be dealing with it, but you have a neighbor, you have a family member, you have someone you know that is dealing with this. So be there to support them. And the importance of this is in one of the most impactful stories in my book, Joanne, and that is where something had happened in my life which pushed me towards the abyss. Things were very dark. And 3 days after that, I went to the hog barn and my neighbor dropped by and he said, looked at me and he said, how are you doing? And I think he could tell I wasn't doing very well at all. And for some strange reason that day, I opened up and I started verbalizing everything going on in my brain. And a few things happened that morning. Number one is he didn't sit there and give me any answers. All he did was listen. He wasn't judgmental. He normalized and validated what I was feeling, which was incredibly helpful. And that's a challenge to absolutely everybody out there is if you have that opportunity, don't shy away from it. You don't have to give answers. All you have to do is, in fact, sit down beside this person and just sit there, say, hey, I'm here. If you want to talk, talk. If you don't, let's just sit. The
Yeah.
other thing is that all this stuff going on in my brain, when I started verbalizing it, I suddenly started understanding that a large percentage of what was up there wasn't even true. And so as I verbalized it, I recognized that. And so that's the key is to talk about it, number one, and number two is it's so easy and so beneficial to support others.
Yeah. No, very, very good advice. That peer-to-peer support. And I always look at that just by being there, sitting there, and listening is helpful.
So
So
you talked,
before
oh,
we wrap up, I think Joanne's going to lead us with some resources in Ontario that can help us.
yes, and Joe's going to put it in the chat too, the links to these resources. So Jerry had mentioned the homeopathic approach, which is great. Here in Ontario, we have, thank goodness, an increase in counselors that have ag-informed therapy that farmers can access relatively easily. There are also different options out there And it is encouraged that if reaching out to one doesn't help it, then there are other options as well. So just naming a few, we have the Farmer Wellness Initiative. So it provides free unlimited counseling support 24/7, 365. The phone line is in the link that that Joe's going to provide. And it provides Ontario farmers, farm workers, and their families with free unlimited mental health counseling. Through the Agriculture Wellness Ontario, you can access mental health education. The Guardian Network includes training and ongoing peer connection and continuous learning for trained guardians. They also have workshops that provide mental health training for farmers and agricultural community. National Farmer Mental Health Alliance. It provides counseling services to farmers and their families. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, across Ontario, there are local counselors that are starting to specialize in agriculture-based therapy. And we have organizations that work on mental health initiatives across Canada to help Canadian farmers. So we have Do More Ag Foundation. It's a charity organization focused on mental health and agriculture across Canada. They host events and workshops across Canada and supports farmer mental health. Then we have Center for Canadian Agriculture Wellbeing just launched a national crisis line. As you can see, there are a lot of other options out there as well. OFA has developed a webpage on our OFA website, so Making Wellness Matter. All of the links and information you can access. And as I said, Joanne should be putting that or has put that. I have to scroll down. I didn't see in the chat. So everything is there, phone numbers, links. You should be able to see that. Are there any more questions? Did I see anything? Did I miss anything? I know that Teresa had said that she has a container, paper, pad, colored pens in her bedroom. And then when she thinks of something that she's grateful for, that she just writes it, which is great. It's good to remind yourself what you're grateful for, that's for sure. And I think Joanne Fuller is going to
Okay.
wrap it up.
No further questions, but
There was
I
something.
just
Oh, just 19.
I just want to say that this is going to be recorded. I know we mentioned it. It is being recorded. You are able to share it with your friends, family, within your networks and within your contacts. It's great information, and I know Gerry is available on his webpage to reach out, and I will probably try to gather that email address again and pop it in there. I wanted to thank you, Gerry, for coming on and talking about your story. It's very insightful, relatable, and that the book, if anybody gets a chance to order the book, it's excellent. The web page, I will put that link in again. And we are very pleased that you were here to share your journey. And I will let you finish, but I do have one last question for you. What are the 3 things that you want people to know from today?
Number one is you are not alone. Number two is it's more than okay to reach out for help. And number three is there is hope and relief. And yes, I would welcome folks to reach out. Follow me on Facebook. I used to be on Twitter, but that's become such a cesspool of garbage. I don't go on there very often. And LinkedIn and Instagram. I post stuff. I don't really like social media, but I was told that I needed to be on social media to market my book, and so I have been. And so I post stuff on there, and so would love to have you folks follow me and connect with me, and we can continue the conversation.
That's great. Thanks so much. I'm just putting my email in there as well into the chat, that if anybody wants to reach out to me, I can connect you with Gerry, or if you have questions within Ontario for farmer mental health, I'm the go-to on that. So I just, again, thank you so much, Gerry and Joanne, for putting this on today as a Lunch and Learn. And I appreciate it's Mental Health Month, so we'd like to just acknowledge that and continue conversations. I think that's the biggest piece. Let's just keep talking. So
Very good.
thanks,
Thanks for
Gerry.
joining, everyone. Thank you, Gerry.
Thank you.